Alright guys, today I'd like to talk about anxiety when you're speaking a second language. And I've prepared this little text, which is actually something that I send out to my students at the beginning of every quarter. So hope you guys can forgive me. I'll be reading this text to you guys. In 2004, armed with my rudimentary Spanish and an intense interest in Mexican culture, I decided to go to the weekly Spanish language table at UC San Diego. So the one thing I vividly remember from that day was meeting this dude named Omar, who spoke, at least to me, perfect Spanish. And back then I didn't know about regional varieties of Spanish. I didn't know if it was Mexican or whatever, but all I knew was that this guy, who was actually of Arabic origin, but told me that he grew up with Spanish speakers, spoke amazingly well. So seeing this guy talk, I naturally, clammed up. I basically just sat at the language exchange and in awe of this guy, and I didn't say a word during the entire thing. It was like an hour-long Spanish exchange. I was so intimidated by this speaker that I thought that I could never compare to his level of fluency. And I think that a lot of you guys, when you're speaking a second language, you compare yourselves to the other students in your class. You compare yourselves to more fluent speakers, maybe people that you listen to on podcasts or things like that. You compare yourself to native speakers for the ones that are more advanced. And this is perhaps why, at least in my class, sometimes my students are afraid of participating, because they might be thinking, oh, well, what if somebody, why participate, why should I participate when somebody who's more fluent and better at Spanish could possibly give a better answer? Why should I even try? And why do we have this fear of trying in a second language? Because speaking a second language is what is called in second language acquisition, the field of second language acquisition, is called face threatening. That is, it can threaten your very sense of self. It can threaten your competence. All of a sudden you go from being this high-performing, communicative locomotive to feeling like you're walking through a field of grammatical landmines. Now, I didn't magically become confident in Spanish. I've gone home from language exchanges feeling angry at myself for committing mistakes, and I've taken it personally when people criticize my Spanish, something that, obviously being a YouTuber happens a lot. But here's what helped. And try and always keep this in mind. You are not a native speaker, and nobody expects you to be one. You're making an effort to learn a new language, a new culture, a new perspective on this world, and you will inevitably make mistakes along the way. Be willing to make these mistakes, but also pay close attention to the corrections people afford you, whether well-intentioned or not. That is, sometimes people will give you nice corrections, and sometimes people will give you corrections, especially non-native speakers love to correct people. I know, because I have been in that boat. I've absolutely been in that boat. Non-native speakers love to correct you, especially if they have reached a high level in whatever language they're learning, because that makes them feel better, and they have their own insecurities about whatever language they're learning. So take these corrections and notice what you need to improve on. Don't take it personally. Whenever you feel nervous or anxiety creeping in, take a deep breath and remind yourself, it is okay to make mistakes, because this is how language learning takes place. I am not a native speaker, and nobody expects me to be one. Try and enjoy the small victories in language learning. Did you use a word that you've never used before? Victory. Did you make a mistake and notice a gap in your knowledge? Victory. So among the YouTube language learning community, and I most associate this with this guy Moses, who's a Laoshu, 55,000, I think. Some of us like to think of language learning as leveling up. you don't level up without taking a few bumps along the way. And nobody expects you to beat the boss of the game on your first try. Alright, hope this video was helpful. Later, guys.